Hi, welcome to episode 12 of The Green Room. My name is James. I'm here with my co-host Nick. How are you, Nicholas?
I'm very well, James. You okay?
You're very good. Very good. Good week?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm just glad the previous week, where it was terrible weather, we actually had a week which was actually relatively stable. So
we've had a few comments about the regularity in which you wear a pink shirt.
I've just got 5 sets,
Have you?
one for each day.
Like Batman?
Yeah, exactly. And then next week it'll be all blue, and then week after that, white.
Good to know.
Pristine white. The 12th episode.
Yes.
We've got to number 12.
We have.
I always think of my my 12 organic eggs, a dozen, which also reminds me of one of my favourite World War II films, which is The Dirty Dozen.
Okay.
Starring Lee Marvin and Charles Bronson. I was wondering whether you saw that.
Charles Bronson?
Yeah, it was. So the film was about like a group of convicts that they had to put together to go into a secret, Allies mission to uncover some plans which would kind of shorten the war. It's a great film. It comes on every Easter and Christmas. You have to watch it.
I shall make sure I watch that at Easter.
But that's what I think about 12 and dozen.
Excellent.
That's what, association.
Excellent. That's
talked about solid wall insulation.
Well, we did, yeah. So that was our second episode in our Insulation Masterclass.
Yep.
And today what we're going to talk about is a few things, to be honest. We're going to start with internal wall insulation, sort of following on from last week.
Yeah.
We're then going to touch on windows, conservatories, that kind of thing. I don't know, we've talked about them briefly previously, but we thought we'd shed a bit more light on them. Mm-hmm. And then see where we get to. And then we've obviously finished with our energy-saving news.
Yeah. And
I think we have a couple of questions from some readers.
Okay.
So we shall answer those as well.
Excellent.
So we talked about external wall insulation last week. Just to give a really quick refresher, it's when insulation essentially gets applied on the outside of the property. We're talking normally to hit building rates, we're talking about 90mm of insulation of EPS, expanded polystyrene. Gets stuck on the outside of the house, and then you put a rendered finish on it normally. Mm-hmm. You can use a brick slip finish if you're trying to recreate a sort of brick property. But on the whole, people are using render. Mm-hmm. So we're going to flip this on its head. So we've got the same solid wall property. Yeah. So talked about it last week. We'll recap it. This is basically most properties pre-1930 were solid wall. Mm-hmm. And to insulate them, obviously there's no cavity to fill. Yeah. So you're going externally. And last week we talked about costs. It's about £100 a square metre to insulate externally. If you're doing internally, give me some things.
Scenarios.
Give me some numbers.
Well, I'll give you some scenarios. So, for instance, you might want to, if you've got a property with fantastical features, so Victorian Wardian terrace, you got really nice brick patterns and stuff like that. You don't really want to cover it up with external insulation.
Yep.
Then really, internal is an option. Also, I don't know, the property might be in a certain part of the country where it's just impossible because of its kind of conservation status.
Yeah.
And that's then, got in terms of the standard you've got to follow.
If you lived in a block of flats, right? So if you're on the third floor up and you are just a flat and a block, be tricky to get insulation
do that
externally, so you might want to do it internally.
If the property is listed, you might not still be able to do internal, but it could be something that you could kind of get through the conservation officer with all the permissions. So it could be an option. So that's the scenarios. It means a lot of upheaval if you're having to have the work done, because essentially what you're doing is you're thickening the internal walls.
Yeah.
So you've got to count or make into account the fact that things are going to be moved in towards the property, and if you're doing all of the different sides,
you're encroaching on the floor space.
So you might want to do it if you're doing, I don't know, a bigger piece of the property. So you're doing a full conversion.
So if you're putting in a new kitchen, for example.
Yes, that's a good point.
Or putting a new bathroom.
And you're just isolating that room, or you've got a cold bedroom upstairs, and actually you don't want to do the whole elevation.
Yeah.
Then it's a good time to kind of improve the quality of those walls.
And so what products are people using internally?
Probably the easiest ones are where you've got the on the outside it looks like a plasterboard, but then it's got this PIR foam insulation stuck onto it. Mm-hmm. So essentially you can just then
dot and dab and you stick it to the wall.
Stick it to the walls, yeah. Or if you're looking to do if you're looking to use wool material, then you'll have to batten out. So you make a frame, vertical frame with battens, and then between those battens you would staple the. This is very simplified. Obviously, there's other kind of mini stages to the process, but in a simplified way, you can put, say, fiberglass wool, sheep's wool, for instance.
Sheep's wool's a good one.
And then still cover it with a plasterboard, and then obviously finish that.
Yeah, so you're not trying to plaster onto squishy wool insulation. You still have that solid surface.
Yeah.
Why would you use wool?
Well, for me, sheep's wool is a good one because of its air filtration properties.
Yeah.
So actually, it absorbs all the nasties in the fabric.
VOCs.
VOCs.
Volatile organic compounds.
Very good.
Thanks very much.
You might want to use that. So there've been studies shown in Europe that where in particularly areas where they've had children in schools and stuff like that, and they've retrofitted it with sheep's wool insulation. It's improved the air quality and
breaks down formaldehyde.
Yes,
that's quite a nice one.
I suppose from noise reduction, so we covered it a little bit in if it's a wall facing a busy road, the wall would
definitely helps, and I think that's a big thing. I think the PIR board is going to do that less so. In terms of U values, we talked about them briefly for the external wall insulation. How does it work with internal wall insulation?
So the standards are pretty much the same, but then how you achieve it, obviously, it's a slightly different installation process.
Yeah.
So obviously a PIR board, as you mentioned last week, has a better lambda. So
what does lambda mean for the layman? And for me?
So lambda is thermal conductivity. So the lower the number, the less it conducts the heat, i.e. it's better insulator. Okay,
so better insulator.
So PIR boards tend to have the best ones.
Yeah.
And then wool probably not as good as that, so therefore you need to use more thicker products.
Have you come across aerogel?
Yeah, I have. So where it works really well, it's when it's added to another compound rather than on its own, because a lot of it's been said about its reflective technology, which, it's a bit sketchy, to be honest. But
have you seen that video? So there's a piece of aerogel and there's a Bunsen burner, and there's an ice cube sat on the top of it, and the ice cube just stays ice. So that must have an incredibly low lambda. Yeah, like an amazing efficiency. Why isn't everyone using that?
It's really expensive.
And that's it?
Yeah.
Do you think, many things...
It's really expensive, and I think on its own, the gel itself, I don't think... It's a bit sketchy, because they talk about this reflective, i.e., heat through... radiance just bounces off of the newly coated walls, and therefore it's insulating it.
Okay.
But I think it works really well where.
But that's aerogel.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Aerogel.
Oh, I said aerogel.
Yes.
What's the stuff that the aerogel's made out of? Isn't it made out of some space?
Yeah. So
insulation.
So the chemical, whatever it is aerogel. You're thinking of aerotherm, which uses aerogel.
Yeah.
So aerogel is the good stuff. Aerotherm is bad,
down.
but it's got little glass.
But where they so say if you take fiberglass and you coat it with aerogel, it improves
massively the efficiency.
But it becomes very expensive.
Okay, fine. All right, sorry, that was a.
So I'd leave. I mean, for domestic applications, so I'd leave that. I mean, I'd use more conventional things like dot and dab, insulate plasterboard or wool. So, yeah.
But I'm trying to hit on an existing property, trying to hit a U value of 0.3.
So PIR board, you might get there with 60 mil.
Okay, so it's still quite a lot.
Yeah.
And then
but that's the problem with internal, So if where you can do external, do external.
Well, because you're losing the space.
Yes.
I think but there are obviously benefits, right? Your room is going to warm up quicker.
Yeah,
it's going to retain the heat better. As you said, if you've got a brick house and it's a lovely old brick house, you're not changing that finish type thing.
The cons, I suppose, are is if the property's got inherent damp problems coming from the external leaf, so you've got porous brick, it's probably not a good idea to do it, because actually what it will do is just trap it within that layer, and then over time...
Between the brick and the insulation.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the other issue, I guess, is that, so previously, if I've got external wall insulation, right, the heat will travel from my house, from my radiator, around the room. It'll warm up the brickwork, it'll hit the insulation, and then kind of come back into the house, right? But the brickwork will stay at a nice temperature. If I suddenly do internal insulation... The
warm edge just circulates in the room.
It never goes through the brick.
Because it's stopping it.
Exactly. So if I've got it's basically the external environment obviously has a higher impact. Because in the winter, if I didn't have an insulated house, right, and I have the heating on, the heat travels through the wall, right? And typically I put the heating on when it's cold, which means that wall will always have heat travelling through it.
Yeah, so it'll be drying and being warm,
etc. Exactly. But I'm suddenly putting insulation on the inside... And so, in theory, you can get interstitial condensation, all these other potential
the dew point just moves in, and then,
if it were to freeze, for example, on the outside, if it's -5, that wall will get to -5, potentially.
Yep.
And then, obviously, it can freeze, and you get onion skin.
Anyway, I mean, it kind of is on the extremity side of it, but globally, if you can do it, it's and you can't do external, it's a good measure, because obviously it's improves the thermal comfort. So, but obviously, you're going to have to watch the space and take those considerations.
But you might want to, so if by doing internal wall insulation, you might want to do things like repoint on the outside.
Yeah.
So do the bit of grouting between all the bricks to make sure that there's no water penetration, because you don't want to have water penetrating damp.
But if you've got a already rendered wall and you don't want to insulate externally, for some reason you want to go internal, probably put a thin coat silicone finish externally if you can render it. Not that. I mean, that's quite kind of like doing the job twice, really. But
yes.
I have seen folk out there who have gone for something like that because they don't want to necessarily manufacture reveals or thicken the walls externally. They just want to keep kind of the same type of look, just a new freshly rendered look, but then internally do something about the thermal efficiency of it.
And what kind of what are you paying per square metre?
I'd say, because you're doing, so remember, it's a big upheaval, so you're going to move radiators, pipes, cabling, etc. You are talking, again, 75 to about 100, 105 pounds per metre.
So it's a pretty similar price.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very extensive. It's going to take, a couple of weeks at least.
And you get the internal upheaval.
Yeah.
Okay.
So floorboarding, etc. So, it's it might be one where, as you said, you're doing a big piece of work, and if you're placing floorboards, etc., you might think about floor insulation as well, and heating. So you're doing it in a kind of, not in an isolated measure, but you're combining other measures.
So if I gave you 10 grand, and you were going to do internal or external, so internal wall insulation or external wall insulation, what would you do, and 5 reasons why?
So I would do external because because of the added benefits of external, as you've just said, so minimises external damp, and keeps the fabric nice and warm.
Yeah.
So it stores the heat within the fabric. Secondly, because my property is just a bit drab externally, so actually it's it could uplift it a little bit. Thirdly, noise reduction, and I know I've said you can do it internally, but I just feel like if I did externally, I would get a consistent coverage. Yeah. Because with the mineral internally, I'm still battening it out, so there's going to be areas that are going to be a weak point. Yeah. Space consideration, 4.
I think especially in London, it's where we're based, property values are extremely high. Yeah. And to lose, if you're taking 60 mil off every internal wall, then actually you're suddenly losing a lot of square footage.
And the 5th reason, it's just about the upheaval. At least with external, I can have the scaffolding outside. It's not going to be nice and pleasant because I don't have to walk past it every day. But at least, I can sort of get on with my day internally.
That was good. I thought you were going to struggle with 5 there.
No,
but they're 5 very sensible reasons.
They're always there.
They're very good. Very good. Okay, so and who does this kind of work? Who carries it out?
Qualified installers, I'd say. It's a little bit different, I'd say, to the external wall applicators, because they're normally carded with a system. Internal, if you're a competent developer, who does lots of internal work, whether it's plastering, kitchens, etc., you've probably come across doing plasterboard and internal wall insulation. For the for the plumbing aspects and stuff, a plumber would be good. So to kind of move the radiators. For the electrician.
Yeah.
So a company that's got those skill sets.
So actually, it's a few trades.
Yes.
But in theory,
so good
if
carpentry
it's just
skills,
the plasterboard
good
you're
carpentry,
doing.
plastering, electrical, and gas.
Okay, blimey.
Yeah.
So I can see why it's expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
have we exhausted internal and solid wall insulation? Have we done anything else to mention? So we've got quite a few more things to cover.
Okay, nothing springs to mind. So let's move on. So we're going to talk about cavity wall insulation now. Right. So external wall, internal wall insulation. Typically, they are done on solid walls.
Yep.
Right. So where there is no cavity. Cavity walls. Shall I give a bit of background on this one?
Yeah, go on.
So cavity walls were introduced mainly, or roughly, in the 1930s. And the reason for the cavity was to create a space where essentially water could go through the first skin of brick. It would then hit this air gap, and gravity would pull it down, and then it would be pulled away from the building. So there's two skins of brick with an air gap in between.
I think firstly they came southwest because of the west of the country, because it's near the Atlantic.
Okay,
and you get
driving
you
rain
get a lot more,
penetrating down.
So that was a good idea, a good innovation for that part.
And so basically these cavities sort of, they work very, very well at taking the water away. In the 1970s, had the oil crisis, and at that stage we suddenly panicked about heating houses and cost of energy bills and stuff, and so we started putting insulation within the cavities, right? So the cavity previous to them was obviously just to stop water penetrating the two skins of brick. But suddenly we have insulation in that one within the cavity.
Also use cheaper substitutes. So they started to use blockwork
on the inside.
On the inside, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's cheaper than using as much brick.
And then, but obviously as time goes on, all the building requirements or building regs get more and more stringent, and so the cavity got wider and wider and wider, and so they could put more and more insulation in. In the 1980s and 1980s. They realised that they could take an unfilled cavity, so a cavity built between kind of 1930s and the 1970s that didn't have insulation in, and they could basically drill lots of holes through it, and they could retrofit insulation into it. So it's basically a big gun, and they pump insulation into the cavity.
Yeah.
And this kind of, the government were really excited by this, so they encouraged essentially everyone to do it. They offered it for free, because you'd get some quite significant energy savings, right? So this was a big thing, and as new houses got built, they would all automatically be built with the insulation already in there. And so now, if you build a cavity wall, you put either a full fill or partial fill, depending on what you're using. But if you fill the whole cavity, you might put 100 mil of mineral wool in there, or sort of 80 mil of PIR board attached to the inner skin of brick. But water essentially is allowed to travel through the first skin, and there is always this air gap that can then, water can travel.
So basically what you're saying is, so that the 90s, they were fully filling these cavities with lots
Fully
of
filling the
different-
cavities.
What are the materials? What are some of the things?
So back in the day, there was this sort of formaldehyde foam type thing, and this was fine. It had urea formaldehyde. That was it. Foam, and it had good levels of efficiency, and it was obviously very easy to pump
80s,
in.
was it?
In the 80s, yeah. And then they moved to pumping mineral wool in, so under quite high pressure, they literally fired this stuff in. And then they took EPS. So when we talk about EPS, normally we talk about actual boards, physical big boards of EPS. But expanded polystyrene EPS is made out of little tiny balls, and so they would basically fire in the EPS balls with a glue, and then the whole thing would set within the cavity.
So special machine, basically.
Yeah, and so it's
Releasing
they're quite clever things they did.
Is that a lance, telescopic lance?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this was to retrofit. Yeah, so this is putting it into existing cavities that were previously empty. And that obviously helped improve the energy efficiency. The issue is when you're retrofitting, well, there's several issues, which I'll cover very briefly. Number one, you are potentially making pathways suddenly from the inner leaf, well, from the outer leaf where water can start crossing through, i.e. the one open to the external environment, and the water crosses through that first skin of brick, then it travels fine pathways across the insulation to the inner brick, and then you have damp problems in the inside. So this is a problem that's really manifests itself near in coastal regions and where you get driving rain, right? So they've kind of now said that cavity wall insulation is not appropriate in some places. The other issue with it is if I'm retrofitting it, so if I'm firing insulation, if I drill if I imagine a 10 metre by 10 metre wall, obviously that's quite a big wall, but I have to put holes everywhere and then I inject it. Yeah. The issue is, if I inject it, in theory, I'm not sure that the insulation has met up with the insulation that I've injected in the other hole. So in principle...
Cold spots.
Yeah, exactly. So if I took a big thermal camera and looked at that wall, I might see... cold spots everywhere where the insulation doesn't.
So that's an install fault, but then also you can have debris in the cavity. So actually physical things in there stopping.
And builders do that. When builders were building the old cavities, they kind of used it as a dustbin.
Like, oh, what's that?
Yeah, I could just put a brick in there.
Yeah,
and it kind of it
stops.
A trowel. Yeah, it stops the insulation filling the whole of the cavity.
Yeah.
And then with the older, so if you now look at the older properties that were done with this urea formaldehyde insulation material. It's begun to break down. It doesn't have an infinite lifespan. And so it's broken down in the cavity and it releases formaldehyde when it breaks down, which is obviously not particularly nice.
So remedials, what can I get rid of it?
We've got two more issues.
Yep.
One is if you're using wool, it started sagging in the cavity. So I've injected it, it's filled the cavity, but over 25 years or whatever, the wool has started sagging within the cavity. So if you kind of look and took a thermal camera, the top of the wool wouldn't have any insulation in because it's all sunk within the cavity. The other one is to save money, when they're putting beads in the cavity, they don't inject it with glue.
Right.
And this tends to manifest itself when you you're doing some repair works. And
when the insulation runs away.
Yeah, you basically you take a brick out or you remove a cover and the insulation literally just starts coming out the bottom. Have you ever had a beanbag?
Yes.
Yeah, have you ever burst a beanbag?
Yes.
It goes
exactly like that.
Everywhere. Right, and you've got the same kind of issue here. So you've got these little polystyrene balls and they just drop out.
It escapes through the air bricks. It? Over time.
Yeah.
It just goes...
So cavity wall insulation, there are some issues with it when
really
you retrofit it.
About all these problems. How do I remediate it? So
you can remove the insulation.
Yeah.
Right. So number one, if your house is in a coastal area, it is not suitable to put cavity wall insulation in there, and that is something that I think the government ignored for a really long time, because it was obviously for them. They were improving the efficiency, right? So they were just trying to put in every property that had a cavity wall. They wanted to fill because it's cheap and you get energy savings. But some properties just aren't suitable for it. So I can remove the insulation. And so obviously some of the insulations you can suck out. It depends on what's in there. But you can get a thing that basically goes in. They take some bricks out and it's this plastic pole. And it just goes back and forth and breaks down the insulation within it and then it's all sucked out.
Right.
And then you can refill it if it's suitable with a new type of insulation. You can get insulation top-ups. So if it's sagged down, you can just put more insulation at the top it right up to the top. So there are solutions for doing it. The other thing is that you're defined by the thickness of the cavity to how much insulation you can put into the wall. I didn't know I knew so much about cavity walls, but you're, if I've got a 55mm cavity, I can only put 55mm in there. If I'm doing external wall insulation or internal, which we talked about earlier today, the internal wall insulation I could put, obviously I'd lose the space internally in my rooms, but I could put 200mm of insulation. So I'm going to get massive energy savings from that compared to 55mm in the cavity. So you've got to kind of think about some of these things.
Yeah.
So I would say that for a lot of people, cavity wall insulation might not be suitable.
But it's not bad at the same time if it's done okay.
Well, this is the thing. There's... not Inca, who are they?
Seegers.
Seeger, who write guarantees on this work. who
Cavity Wall Insulation Guarantee Agency.
Yeah, so we'll touch briefly on them
CIGA.
in a minute. But they are basically warranty about 8-9 million jobs.
Yeah.
So 8 or 9 million homes have been done with cavity wall insulation, and the number of faults, the number of issues.
I'd say it's
are
not necessarily
limited.
they've warranted all of them, because you do have other insurance providers, but I would have said ones that are warranted,
they've done the bulk,
significant proportion.
But what I mean is that in naming them, they've backed these houses, they've backed the guarantees, and a huge number have done it, and there aren't anywhere near 8 million complaints. If you see what I mean, it's a very small percentage of properties that go wrong when you're looking at those kind of numbers. That being said, SEGA do get, and I can't comment on this, but I can raise the issue that we get a lot of people who have cavity wall insulation and it has gone wrong, them telling SEGA, and
because they've had a warranty place.
They've had a warranty, and SEGA have done nothing, and this is what we hear a lot. I don't want to get in trouble from SEGA saying they're not very good.
Yeah, hopefully they've
they're
acting on the
exactly. But this is something we're hearing time and time again. So if cavity wall insulation does go wrong, unfortunately, the body that have guaranteed them, they're not taking much action.
So I'd say likewise, like external insulation, the installers are trained usually by system providers of this insulation. So whether it's
so Thermobead is one. So Thermobead make the EPS beads that go in.
Or the likes of Rockwall and Knauf who do the mineral fibre.
Yeah, that's blown in. Yeah.
And
so this isn't one you're going to do yourself.
No.
To be honest, you wouldn't do solid wall insulation yourself unless you've got any sense. It's a big job.
And then separate to that, the installers that are kind of doing grant work or certainly underwriting it with insurance and these warranties should have a certification body that stands by them. So whether that's the BBA or NIC, CIE or NAPIT or Stroma, etc., they should be qualified with those certification bodies, just because they audit them from time to time.
And I think if you are going to get cavity wall insulation and you're worried that your installer hasn't got that, give us a shout.
Yep.
And we hopefully can do a bit of digging for you and come back to you with, if that's all good.
Right. So that's cavity walls.
What's it cost?
Exhausted.
No, it's not. We haven't. How much does it cost?
£10-12 a square metre.
There you go. Now it's covered.
Now it's done.
Getting it removed, how much is that?
If you were to get it removed, you're looking at about £20 a square metre.
Okay.
Yeah.
So windows, and then we'll do conservatories. I know.
I'm not sure we have time for windows. We get questions and news.
Questions and news.
Well, in 27 minutes, we've got another 10 minutes.
Let's do questions and news.
Questions and news. Okay. What? So news. Well, let's do the news first, and then we'll finish off on the questions because I'm not quite sure what the questions are. They are anyway in the news. Wind power. So this was so last week we were talking about gas boilers
being banned,
sort of
banned.
Finished off on new properties.
Yeah.
The government wants to put its eggs in the offshore wind basket. So what they're saying is, I'm reading this piece in the Guardian actually. So they want about a third of all electricity produced by offshore wind. Do you see any problems with that?
That's a great idea.
You think it's great?
No, I why not? We've become world leaders in wind power. Yep. I think the issue always is with intermittent renewable sources, i.e. power is produced when the wind blows. Mm-hmm. If the wind ain't blowing, you got no power.
Yes, but the theory is, when it's offshore, because it's subject to currents and all that stuff, it's more likely to be windy offshore, isn't it?
More likely, but you can't guarantee it.
No.
Right? So if it's half time of the World Cup final and the wind doesn't blow, and suddenly everyone goes to make their kettle, make a cup of tea and put the kettle on, and there ain't enough electricity, then we've got real problems. So I think you need to. So I think it's great. I think you may as well aspire to do something like the government is setting out, and it's not.
Predictability is bad, and when it's too much is being produced is quite bad for the old grid, isn't it? Because
they can't cope.
Yeah.
They can't cope. I mean, it's like having thousands of mini power plants.
And then transmission losses, I suppose, because if it's miles and miles away from the coast, it's
Yeah.
still got to travel onto the land.
I think fundamentally, and I think we've been talking about this in the office, we aren't set up yet to store electricity. I know it's difficult to store, but we're talking about things like batteries.
Mm-hmm.
We have other countries taking great leaps with battery storage, and we are, I think, sadly falling behind.
Yep.
And so I think it's going to take some time. But if we were to increase our electric car infrastructure,
Yep.
have charging points all over, they talk about, and I think this is a cool technology, but they talk about your car becoming your battery storage. So I drive my electric car during the day. I then go home in the evening. I then use the electricity from my car, i.e. the batteries in my car, to power my house.
Yep.
And then I charge it when no one is taking electricity from the grid in the evenings, like
It's a
2
Tesla
in the
concept,
morning.
isn't it? So
I think that is someone has thought very hard about that, and I think that is a seriously clever piece of tech that is obviously going to come to the fore in the relatively near future.
Yep.
But at the moment, we're a million miles away from it.
Yeah.
We just don't have those capabilities. And so I think it's a great idea, and it's great to aspire to power our homes and power the country with renewables. But I just don't think we're ready. Is that fair? What do you think?
So I think we'll probably get there. I think what we need to do is we need to just take the issues a bit more seriously. Lot less scattergun and piecemeal approach. A bit more joined up government. I think, unfortunately, the Energy Department, it seems to revolve. Well, the minister seems to revolve, around the revolving door every other month or so, and they seem to be rebranding departments, which doesn't help. And it should be something that's covered by all politicians. We should have a national agreement on what we should do next. And I think that would just help. It's not being used as a party political tool, but I'm hopeful. We'll get there. So quite positive.
Okay.
Anyway, so I think that's the major thing to use, and I think it's sort of linked onto it's and more stringent things are coming on diesel cars and the internal combustion engine, etc. That means the electric should be the standard, but we just then have to just close that gap by producing more renewable energy, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think nuclear is a serious option, and I just think. I think the way we've done the nuclear policy is not the best way to do it. There are countries that have made a success out of it, and I still think it's one of the safest. I've changed my mind though. I always thought
there are going to be comments on this.
I think it's the safest form of electricity generation.
Safer than a solar panel.
Yes, because at least with nuclear fuel, it's compact and you can dispose of it and store it somewhere. Whereas, how the hell do you recycle solar cells?
Yeah.
So, and are we in the pursuit?
No, I'm not sure about that.
And are we in the pursuit of renewable sources doing more damage to the environment? So actually, we're becoming more low carbon, but actually we're damaging.
Well, we are because we're going to mine
on the other
precious metals and things.
So, but that is a very interesting topic, and I do want to cover that because. My mind has been swayed over the last few years. I was very much anti-nuclear, but I'm beginning to kind of change my mind. But anyway, we've got more important things, i.e. the questions of some of our readership out, which is more important.
Okay, so you've now been sent questions, right?
Than our long-term view of things. So it's one for you, James. And the question is, if I move house, does the owner get the present-day feed-in tariff, or does the person...
I saw this one come through.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So
what happens to it basically?
So if you move house, you forego your feed-in tariff. The new person coming in will get your feed-in tariff
because of what it sits with the meter.
Yeah. So we get lots of people that say, "Can I take the solar panels off my roof and move them to my new house?" No.
So unfortunately, it's one of your selling points for the property. Then,
It should be, and I think a lot of estate agents don't know that. Well, estate agents don't know, right? And so they have no idea about these things, and so they don't include that as a sort of selling point. But yeah, the person moving in with solar panels on the roof, provided they're not a roof to rent scheme where someone has forgone the feed-in tariff anyway, they will receive the future payments. And if they were put on 5 years ago, you've got 20 more years of payments. Might be £1,000 a year. Yeah. For another 20 years, which is nice money, right?
And so, but that doesn't mean so you will get it at the rate that was locked in when it was originally installed, not
today's
what
rate.
It is now.
Well, I mean, it's about to be canned anyway, the feed-in tariff.
Which kind of goes into the next question. It says, solar thermal. They're saying, is our solar PV payment stopping this year?
Solar PV, right, the export tariff. So we talked about solar PV tariff. The export tariff is staying in place. But the generation tariff,
and that's for new installs, not
anything that's gone.
So if you've locked in,
it'll stay what it is.
Yeah.
But any new solar PV installs after a certain date, and I can't remember when that date is, will no longer receive 1st of April. So you will not receive it. So I think, unfortunately, it's going to kill off the solar industry, but that's just another government decision.
It's not joined up, but it's still okay if you're doing a new build.
If you're doing a new build, and you're doing, as you've kind of said, and I think a lot of this ties back. If you're doing extensive building works on your property, then these things are definitely still to consider. Because you can get a roof now where the solar panels are just built, so they're not put onto the roof; they're built within the roof.
Tiles themselves,
and they can have solar panel tiles and all this sort of stuff.
It is
some clever
worth
text.
noting that the government has said that they won't even consider replacing the feed-in tariff with anything until 2025 is when they'll think about it.
So if they're thinking about replacing the feed-in tariff in 2025...
They expect it by 2050.
Yeah, 2050, 2080, something like that. They might come up with new technology.
Okay, and I think we've got time for... Thanks, Harry, for that.
Thank you.
We've got time for just one more question, and it's basically, should I get... Even though I don't have an electric car at this point, should I get an electric charging point installed anyway on my front drive? So basically, there's someone saying, should I be ready for the electric car revolution?
Okay... It depends if you have any intention of getting an electric car or you know anyone who drives one, right? Because otherwise I'm going to have an electric car charging point outside my house, but I'm not going to use it, and I don't know anyone.
I think it's someone kind of thinking, probably add 10 grand to the value of their property.
The reason why you might consider it is I know there are grants out there at the moment.
Yeah, less so than I think 1.5 2 years ago.
Yes, and so if you can go and find a grant that will cover the cost of having one installed.
Yeah,
then definitely worth doing.
Oh, here's an idea. Maybe you can just charge your neighbours for parking up at your driveway.
Charge them.
Yeah.
So you're paying for the electricity.
Exactly.
But they, if I so on that one, it's up to you, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's tricky question to answer that one.
You'd be looking at the average cost of installing one is about £1,000, and you'd be looking at around about 800 quid of that would be covered by two different funding options.
So £1,000 cost, £800 worth of grants.
I think
so
if you're
if you're
a business, is it a good one? Because I'm sure it's a capital allowance, isn't it? You get.
Well, you're going to know more than me.
Well, probably not, James. But I'm just thinking about it from a principal point of view. If it is a capital investment, so I'm sure it would qualify for some sort of tax break, but also encourage your.
I haven't answered that one. I don't think we've answered that one very well.
To charge one up at work, so maybe it's one for next time.
Okay, well, listen, I think that concludes the Insulation Masterclass episode 3.
What do we miss out on this week? We missed out on conservatories,
windows, doors, all that sort of stuff.
Floors, roofs, pipes.
No, we've done
loft insulation.
But we will be sure to cover those in at some point in the near future. But thank you for watching on YouTube. Where would you be able to listen to this? And we need to do this at the beginning because I always remember to do it at the end.
I'll just say click the link to episode 11 because I summarise it quite nicely. But you can find us on the Green Age website, and at the top there's going to be a little icon there that says podcast. And then when you click that will open a window, and then from there you can use popular streaming sites on Apple iTunes, and
but you can actually go onto Apple itself
and search
type
for
in,
the Green Room.
Well, so the Green Room or the Green Age,
Yeah.
we will pop up. You can do it on Spotify, on TuneIn Radio, on Stitcher. So there's lots of ways you can listen to us, or you can watch us
And
on
if you've
YouTube.
been a loyal subscriber already, I would just say send that link on to your friends and family.
And if you have
increase that
questions,
community.
if you have questions that you want to ask away. We don't always know the answer, but we will endeavour
to find out. Ask the question.
Cool. So I think that concludes episode 12. So thanks, Nick.
See you next week.
Cheers.